coming to you from the mountains and the plains. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Altman.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance.
And now your hosts, Joe Altman and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. My name is Max McGuire, coming to you live today from the Great White South. And no, that is not a racial comment. Calm down. I can already hear the leftists in the comment section. He said Great White South. No, it's a take on the Great White North, Canada. Calm down. It's not a white supremacy comment. It's very cold here in Texas. Just a little warning. Very, very cold. That's why I have my cold weather gear. My home office is right above my garage. So it is the coldest room in the house in the winter and the hottest room in the house in the summer. So I got that going for me, which is nice. Our local power company has also told us that they're going to have randomized rolling blackouts throughout the day because they cannot handle electricity use during this snowstorm. We made fun of Texas for freaking out the minute it went below 32 degrees. We made fun of Texas when it started drizzling and the wintry mix. But the snow has absolutely brought the state of Texas to its knees. That's not really a cheap shot. People say it's a cheap shot. It's an observation. I've never lived anywhere. I've lived all around the country. Never lived anywhere where a couple inches of snow has just dismantled the entire infrastructure. But I hope everyone is safe today. Hope everyone stays warm. If you're in Texas, if you're in the southern parts of the United States experiencing this cold weather, Mr. Producer, go ahead, put up my screen. This is what we're experiencing right now. Record low temperatures. I mean, right now it's, this is from yesterday. Right now it is 10, 15 degrees outside, which is unheard of in Texas. And we did get a couple inches of snow, so my son got to run outside and play in the snow. He thought it was Christmas. He was asking for Santa. It was really fun explaining to him that there weren't going to be any presents. But he got to play out in the snow today, make a snowman. The reason that we are at the risk of a blackout, which the good news is I do have an emergency battery power for my desktop. It doesn't run long. It runs a couple minutes, giving me time to save stuff so it just doesn't completely turn off. So if that goes on, I'm going to have to wrap up the show right then and there, and it'll probably only go an hour just to be safe. But just a heads up, the reason that they can't handle this cold temperature, Mr. Producer, put up my screen, is because the wind turbines are frozen. Yes, the wind turbines have now frozen solid. We have 16 mile per hour gusts of wind, so you'd think they'd be producing the energy, but they are frozen. And as I said, there are rolling outages underway across Texas. Tens of thousands without power in San Antonio. We had our power go out a couple times, but apparently they are saying it's going to come out, going to go out even more. And if you want to know why this is happening, it's because the local power company decided to go with clean energy, which nothing wrong. I like clean energy. If you're going to use it as a supplement, fine. But they got rid of fossil fuel facilities that create energy in place of solar panels and wind farms, and neither of those work during a snowstorm. So kind of you get what you pay for, which is very unfortunate. So this isn't a weather forecast, not gonna go on any more about this. Just letting you guys know I'm very cold right now. So if you pity me, make sure you hit that thumbs up button on Facebook. Make sure you give us a like on YouTube as well, and give us a follow on DLive. Make sure you do that so I am not doing this for nothing. So let's get into it. I'm sure that you guys saw over the weekend the clip that went viral, which was Trump's attorney, Michael Van der Veen, absolutely smoking, dismantling, destroying CBS News reporter. Because, so we're going to play this clip. And we're going to comment on it because it was a masterclass. And if you remember, we were very suspicious of Michael van der Veen because this is the news, Mr. Producer, put up my screen. This is the news that came out right before the impeachment trial went underway. That van der Veen, just 2 years ago, was overheard calling Donald Trump an effing crook. So yes, we were very suspicious of whether van der Veen would give Donald Trump a good defense, but it turns out that he is a rare breed in today's legal profession. He can dislike his client and still give them a worthy defense. Seems like that's missing in today's legal field. I know there's a lot of good lawyers, but there's also a lot of lawyers who kind of wear their politics on their sleeve and refuse to represent clients that they politically disagree with. I mean, it used to be that the saying was, I disagree with what you're saying, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. In the left's cancel culture, it's the exact opposite. They disagree with what you say, and they're going to do everything they can to cancel you for saying it. So yeah, Donald Trump's impeachment lawyer that we're about to watch, dismantling that CBS reporter. The CBS reporter's name was Lana Zak. He hated Trump, apparently. He called him an effing crook. But when it mattered, he was able to deliver on the floor of the Senate. Donald Trump was not convicted. I guess we can just start off by saying that. He was not convicted. He is now the most acquitted president in American history. Yes, that is the headline. That is the takeaway. Anytime a Democrat tells you that he is the most impeached, no, tell them that he is the most acquitted. And that by being the most acquitted, everything against him has now been debunked. I posted that on Facebook last night. Pronounced that way, debunked. And people didn't get the joke. People thought I misspelled it. It's debunked. And that is, of course, an homage to that female state senator from Georgia who stood up and declared that a video was debunked when it hadn't even been released yet. So let's go ahead. We're going to start playing this video. We're going to start playing this video, and we're going to cut a couple times because we have to. We can't just share their content. We have to make this fair use. So we'll cut in a couple times and comment on it. But what Michael van der Veen did is quite literally a masterclass in dismantling a biased anchor. I wish that every lawyer, every commentator would do this when an anchor so obviously lies. Let's go ahead and start playing this. Let's play cut number 1.
Joining me now is former President Trump's attorney, Michael van der Veen. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Let's get right into those words that we heard from Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. He ended the trial with this passionate speech about President Trump's involvement in the insurrection. During it, he said that the former president is still liable for everything he did during his period in office. Are you expecting to face more charges against Mr. Trump in the near future, and do you anticipate being part of that defense?
No, that's just political rhetoric, and I was hopeful that something would come out of this, that the political rhetoric would stop out of Washington, D.C., but I guess apparently it hasn't.
Were you, though, surprised to hear those words coming from the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate?
I'm not surprised to hear a politician say anything at all. No.
Well, throughout the trial, you denied that Mr. Trump had a role in inciting the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. You argued, first of all, that there was no insurrection, but during your closing arguments, you seemingly admitted that there was, in fact, an insurrection, using that word, saying that was not up for debate. What role did the former president play?
You didn't understand the case. I used the word
I'll give you the opportunity to clarify, sir.
Sure. I used the word insurrection in my closing argument when quoting the charging documents. What happened at the Capitol?
So, very, very important. She basically tries to twist his words to claim that he admitted there was an insurrection, when no, all van der Veen did in his closing arguments was reference the charging documents, the article of impeachment. Saying my client is accused of inciting an insurrection is not itself an admission that it even was an insurrection. We keep hearing that term. We keep hearing the word riot, insurrection. There were a few dozen, yes, violent people who were punching police officers, destroying property, but there were thousands of others there who were not violent. I mean, by the numbers, the vast majority of people who walked into the Capitol that day resembled tourists more than they did insurrectionists. And we covered at the time how they were obeying the velvet ropes in Statuary Hall, however they were taking pictures of artwork and statues. The idea it was insurrection, it was a riot. Yeah, no, it was a mostly peaceful protest. But it was interesting that the CBS News anchor, Lana Zak, was trying to pigeonhole him and trying to trap him and say that he admitted there was an insurrection when he did no such thing. And interesting that, I mean, you don't see that often, how he was able to quickly dispatch what she was saying with thought-out logic. Let's go back and listen to it. This next part is really, really good. Him comparing what happened at the Capitol on January 6th to what happened during this impeachment trial. Let's go back to it and play it.
On January 6th is absolutely horrific. But what happened at the Capitol during this trial was not too far away from that. The prosecutors in this case doctored evidence. They did not investigate this case, and when they had to come to the court of the Senate to put their case on, because they hadn't done any investigation, they doctored evidence. It was absolutely shocking. I think when we discovered it and we were able to expose it and put it out, I think it turned a lot of senators. The American people should not be putting up with this. They need to look at who these House managers were and look to see whether these are the folks they want representing them. It was shocking to me. Wouldn't have believed it.
Okay, let's pause it there. So he mentioned what we talked about on the podcast on Thursday, which was that, yes, there was evidence that was doctored. The Democrats put forward doctored, altered evidence, not harmless doctored evidence, things that were done specifically to bolster their case. In one case, we didn't even cover this. In one case, they actually changed the year that the tweet was put out. It was a 2020 tweet. They changed the year to 2021 to make it look like that had something to do with the events on January 6th when it was the previous year, right? We talked about how they changed wording, how Jennifer Lynn Lawrence wrote cavalry instead of cavalry, and they changed the wording to make it sound like she was bringing horseback soldiers when she was actually bringing the crucifixion of Christ symbolically. And then there was this one. Miss Brewster, put up my screen. It was Jennifer Lynn Lawrence's tweet saying that we will now bring it to D.C. on January 6th and proudly stand beside you. Thank you for fighting for us. This was a tweet that Donald Trump retweeted, and the Democrat impeachment managers added a blue check mark next to Jennifer Lynn Lawrence's name that shouldn't have been there. She was not a verified user. She is not a public figure. She is not a media personality. She is just a concerned citizen who does some grassroots activism. But they added that blue check mark to make her seem more legitimate than she actually was. Now, she's a very legitimate person. She's an activist. But I'm just saying that she was not a movie star. She is not a personality who's on TV, right? The blue check mark is designed to make you know that, yes, that is the person who is speaking in case there are other people with parody accounts pretending to be that person. So you have to be a public figure. They made that check mark there to try and convince people that Donald Trump was not only retweeting the people organizing it, but the people organizing it were public figures, people of importance enough that Twitter would actually give them that blue check mark. So I want you to listen. This is where it goes off the rails in this interview on CBS News. You just heard Michael Vander Veen mention that they doctored evidence. Watch how the CBS News anchor, Lana Zak, responds, how she tries to belittle it as, oh, they just did little things. And then watch how Michael Vander Veen roasts her, demolishes her, and picks her apart. Let's go back and play the video.
Let's follow up with a point that you're making right now about the House managers, as you say, doctoring evidence, and the argument.
They didn't deny
for our viewers.
They didn't deny it. I put it in front of them 3 times.
To be clear for our viewers, what you're talking about now is a check mark. That's a verification on Twitter that did not exist on that particular tweet. A 2020 that should have actually read 2021, and the selective editing, you say, of the tapes. Is that the doctored evidence of what you're speaking?
Wait, that's not enough for you? That's not enough for you?
Wait,
no,
sir,
no.
I'm trying.
Listen,
I am not a juror in this trial. What I'm trying to be clear for our viewers is what you're referring to, because not everybody has been following.
It's not okay.
Not everybody,
to doctor
sir,
a little bit of evidence.
Respectfully, I have not said it is. I have not said it is okay.
Ma'am, your question is
I want to be clear for our viewers.
All right, pause it. I love how she says respectfully, and he just chimes right back, respectfully, it's not okay to doctor a little bit of evidence. And he's absolutely right. She's trying to belittle it. He made a claim that was factually accurate, that the other side doctored evidence. Rather than just saying, yes, you are correct, she is trying to belittle that claim by highlighting how, in her apparent opinion, insignificant the alterations were. Right? Oh, well, they did this, they did that. And she didn't even name them all, right? She didn't name the fact that Eric Swalwell mispronounced a word deliberately to make it seem more sinister. But I love how he doesn't let her get away with it. So many personalities, so many lawyers will go on these kinds of shows. They'll say their piece, and then they'll let the anchor spin it for their own narrative, and he doesn't let it happen. Let's go back to it and keep playing.
To be clear for our viewers about what exactly you're saying when you say doctored evidence.
The media has to start telling the right story in this country. The media is trying to divide this country. You are bloodthirsty for ratings, and as such, you're asking questions now that are already set up with a fact pattern. I can't believe you would ask me a question indicating that it's all right just to doctor a little bit of evidence. There's more stuff that we uncovered that they doctored, to be frank with you, and perhaps that will come out one day. But we won this case, and I'm not a sore loser, but what happened, or a sore winner, I should say, but what should happen is somebody should look at the conduct of these House managers. It's unconscionable, aside from all of the due process violations that my client had. And the media should be looking at a square, straight way. The straight way. When I watch the news, I watch one station and it's raining. I watch another station at the same time and it's sunny. Your coverage is so slanted, it's got to stop. You guys have to stop and start reporting more like PBS does rather than a TV news show that doesn't have any journalism.
So it's a perfect takedown. It's a perfect takedown, and he's right. He's right. When you look at MSNBC, they will report that it's raining. Fox News will report that it is cloudy, and you look outside and it's sunny, and you're like, what the hell? He's absolutely right. And the fact that they can't just report the news, that yes, the Democrats fabricated evidence. They had such a weak case that they felt it necessary to doctor evidence. Not just the check mark, but also to chop up and edit the videos on their first day to make sure that the jury did not see the video of Donald Trump saying, go peacefully, right? That would never fly in a courtroom. It would never fly in a courtroom. If a prosecutor played a video that they say is evidence and deliberately stopped it right before the defendant said something exonerating, right? Which is, go peacefully. You can't say someone incited a riot if he instructed the crowd to go peacefully. Never would have fly. Never would fly. It keeps going, though. Let's go back to it.
Integrity at all. What I'm telling you is that they doctored evidence. And I believe your question says, well, it's only a Twitter check and changing a year of a date here. They switched the date of a Twitter a year to try to connect it to this case. That's not a small thing, ma'am. The other thing they did is they put a check mark on something to make it look like it was a validated account when it wasn't. And when they were caught, they didn't say anything about it. They didn't even try to come up with an excuse about it. And that's not the way our prosecutors or our government officials should be conducting themselves. And the media shouldn't be letting them get away with it either. I'm tired of the biased media on both sides, left and right. What this country wants, what this country needs, is this country to come together, to take the left and the right and find a middle ground and start responsibly being our public officials, our elected officials. And one of the reasons why they do it is because of the media. Because the media wants to tell their narrative rather than just telling it like it is. And frankly, I'm tired of it. I'm not a media, I'm not in front of your cameras all the time, but what I've been subjected to this last week.
I understand, and I've given you the opportunity.
You don't want to hear the truth. Yeah. Okay.
I've given you the opportunity. I will remind you that what I said was that for our viewers who have not been following all of the hours of this trial, to be clear about what you are speaking about. And I understand
I'm speaking
that you
about
seem
the House
very
manager's
upset.
failure to prove their case. That's what I'm telling you. They weren't able to prove their case.
You have won the acquittal of your client.
Yes,
and if you'd
I
like
did.
to continue to talk about this conversation, we can have that discussion.
I don't need to.
But for me to ask a question,
A slanted question that was set up to say it's okay for them to cheat. That was your question. Isn't it okay for them to cheat?
I didn't say that.
It's just a little bit. You said, to be fair, it was only a check on the Twitter. That's what you said. You got to live by your words. That's the problem. The media has to start living by the truth and not try to create a narrative.
Michael Vander Veen.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. I do appreciate.
Yeah.
Okay. I see you taking off your microphone now. That was President Trump's defense attorney, Michael Vander Veen.
So the mainstream media, that when they reported on this, they actually cut out the whole dismantling part, and they only played the part where he ripped the microphone off and threw it on the ground. And the headline they ran was Trump attorney storms off of set. Angrily storms off of set. That's how that they played that. That's how that the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, reported it. They didn't actually report the details of how the Democrats doctored evidence. They only showed the little bit. I mean, it's exactly what we're talking about here. The media cuts things up to fit their narrative. Instead of what conservatives all saw over the weekend, Trump attorney blasts or demolishes a CBS News anchor. They saw Trump attorney takes off microphone. Unbelievable. So we're going to play a couple other clips. That are important from the last couple days that we didn't play at the time, but I still want to play them. During the impeachment trial, Donald Trump's lawyers took to task the Democrats for the Charlottesville lie. This is the lie that has pervaded leftist politics for years. It is what Joe Biden claims prompted him to get into the race to begin with. The idea that Donald Trump said that there were good people on both sides at the Charlottesville riot, protest, whatever you want to call it. It's a lie. Donald Trump didn't say that. He did not say that white supremacists were fine people. He said that there were fine people. And he specifically said not the white supremacists. So the Trump team actually showed the Democrats' video that they played when they had the stage, how they talked about Trump saying fine people. And then they stopped the Democrats' video right where they stopped it and show how Trump kept talking and show what the Democrats deliberately left out in their impeachment presentation. So we have that, Mr. Producer. That's that YouTube link I just sent you. Let's go ahead and play that so everyone can see.
Well, this lie traveled around the world a few times, made its way into the Biden campaign talking points, and ended up on the Senate floor. The Charlottesville lie. Very fine people on both sides. Except that isn't all he said. And they knew it then, and they know it now. Watch this.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, excuse me, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits, and with the helmets, and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No.
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this, there are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country. Does anybody have a final? Does anybody have, you have an infrastructure.
What makes you think? This might be today the first time the news networks played those full remarks in their context.
Yeah, pretty amazing, huh? So I love that the Trump the Trump legal team forced them to air that. All the news channels were forced to air it. And it shows exactly what we're talking about. They took a clip that was a couple seconds long and just cut it right there and then took out 2 minutes of context. 2 minutes of context. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. And they got caught, and thank goodness they actually got held accountable. Thank goodness. So that was the Trump legal team dismantling the claim made by the Democrat impeachment managers. I mean, the fact that they even brought the video up is insanity, right? This thing has been debunked so many times. That even CNN has admitted that it was debunked. They never correct people nowadays when they make the claim. But the fact that the Democrats brought up something that's so easily debunked, it's stunning. And kudos to the Trump team for playing that and making sure everyone knew just how big of a liar those Democrat impeachment managers were. So the vote ultimately was 57 to 43. 57 to 43, 10 votes shy of the 67 necessary to convict the president. So Donald Trump was acquitted. Democrats are saying it's a technicality. No, you didn't win the day. It's amazing how that always works. Like, oh, well, if there were different rules, we would have won. Well, yeah, that's kind of the whole point of the rules. Oh, before I forget, Mr. Producer, put up my screen. During that video, I found it. This is how CBS News and Yahoo reported that clip we just showed you. Trump attorney rips off mic after questioning from CBS News anchor. Now, he ripped off the mic after he dismantled her, and she had nothing else she wanted to talk about. But yeah, that is how they reported it. So the 7 Republicans, we posted this on our Facebook page. Go ahead, put up my screen again. The 7 Republicans who voted against the president, voted to convict the president. They are Romney, Collins, Murkowski, Sass, Burr of North Carolina, Cassidy of Louisiana, and Toomey of Pennsylvania. Now, Toomey has said that he will not run again. Burr apparently is not running again. So they don't need to be primary. They're just gone. The others, Romney, Collins, Murkowski, Sass, and Cassidy, all believe that they have political careers left in Washington, D.C., left in the Republican Party. We have to remove all of them. And yeah, I know Cassidy got censured. Great. A censure is a slap on the wrist. Unless that censure is met with being cut off from joint fundraising dollars, right, from re-election funds, unless it includes that, the censure means absolutely nothing. There was another person who wasn't on that list, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, well, actually, before we get to him, let's talk about Senator Burr. Senator Burr is really interesting. Senator Burr voted that it was unconstitutional to even hold the trial. And yet, when it came time to vote, he voted that Trump was guilty. And this is a press release that he put out. This is what he wrote. When this process started, I believed that it was unconstitutional to impeach a president who was no longer in office. I still believe that to be the case. However, the Senate is an institution based on precedent, and given that the majority in the Senate voted to proceed with this trial, the question of constitutionality is now established precedent. As an impartial juror, my role is now to determine whether House managers have sufficiently made the case for the article of impeachment against Donald Trump, and he says that they did. So he admits that he believes the trial to be unconstitutional, but he voted to convict anyway. That is, I often call Republicans invertebrates for a reason, because this man is spineless. Absolutely spineless. To even put it out like that, like who possibly drafted, because he didn't actually write this. Maybe he bounced ideas. Someone else wrote it for him. For them to think that this was like a good statement, that this makes him look good. Yes, it's unconstitutional. I still believe it, but I voted to convict him anyway. I mean, what is that? What is that? So we're going to have to go after all these people. But not every Republican who wanted to convict Trump voted to do it. There was Mitch McConnell. We can go ahead. Mitch McConnell gave a speech after voting to acquit, in which he said Donald Trump was guilty and basically insinuated that Donald Trump deserved to be prosecuted by law enforcement. I mean, there is not a single lawyer out there who will honestly and truthfully tell you that speech Donald Trump gave could possibly be prosecuted for inciting violence. You can't. Donald Trump said go peacefully. That is the end of the discussion. You cannot say that Donald Trump said peacefully, but he actually meant wink, wink. Supreme Court does not allow that. Right? It doesn't. Again, Brandenburg v. Ohio. Read the Supreme Court case. Very, very interesting. We've covered it on the show before. You cannot attribute malice to constitutionally protected speech. You can't. Absolutely can't. So Mitch McConnell gave a speech. It was a 20-minute speech. We were going to play most of it. He doesn't deserve it. Because that man, Turtle Mitch, Cocaine Mitch, whatever you want to call him, the fact that he's still at the helm of the Republican Party disgusts me. And it shows just how bought and paid for the Republican establishment is. That after Donald Trump won the White House, they would abandon Trump and his supporters. This isn't only about Trump. It's also about the supporters. It's about conservatism. I mean, look back on it. When was the last time we had a truly conservative president? I mean, I'd say Reagan. Was H.W. Bush truly conservative? I don't know. I wouldn't call him that. I mean, he had conservative leanings. George W. Bush, was he truly conservative? Well, he had conservative leanings, but he didn't do a whole lot for gun rights, right? There's lots of issues that George W. Bush failed on. Donald Trump was the first, in my opinion, truly conservative president since Ronald Reagan. And you look at the decades in between, the Republican Party was content with losing, right? They insisted on running a moderate establishment candidate, and if they lost, that was okay. They never actually wanted to govern as conservatives. They never wanted to do it. We didn't actually win in between Reagan and Trump. Republican Party hadn't really won anything. You say, oh, the Tea Party. Well, the Tea Party, yeah, sure. Tea Party. But what did the Tea Party do? The Tea Party gave the Senate to Mitch McConnell. the Tea Party gave the House of Representatives to John Boehner and then to Paul Ryan. Did they govern as conservatives? No. I'm still waiting for that John Boehner promise we've talked about on the podcast a while ago. If the Supreme Court did not rule that the DACA amnesty program was unconstitutional, that Republicans would make sure it was stricken from the U.S. Code, the Federal Register. Never happened, did it? Never happened. Because they're not actually conservatives. They only talk like conservatives. When it actually comes time to govern, they don't want to govern. They're happy with losing. They don't want to actually have the power to do anything because they don't want to govern as conservatives. It's much easier to run and fundraise as an opposition leader than it is to actually do the things you promised. Well, Mitch McConnell gave a 20-minute speech in which he declared Donald Trump was guilty. And again, insinuating that he should be prosecuted. Not going to happen. We're not going to play the entirety, but I want to give you a taste of what Cocaine Mitch said after voting to acquit. Let's go ahead and play that Mitch McConnell clip, Mr. Producer.
January 6th was a disgrace. American citizens attacked their own government. They used terrorism to try to stop a specific piece of domestic business they did not like. Fellow Americans beat and bloodied our own police. They stormed the Senate floor. They tried to hunt down the Speaker of the House. They built a gallows and chanted about murdering the Vice President. They did this because they'd been fed wild falsehoods by the most powerful man on earth. Because he was angry he'd lost an election. Former President Trump's actions preceded the riot for a disgraceful dereliction of duty. The House accused the former president of, quote, incitement. That is a specific term from the criminal law. Let me just put that aside for a moment and reiterate something I said weeks ago. There's no question, none, that President Trump is practically and morally responsible for provoking the events of the day. No question about it. The people who stormed this building believed they were acting on the wishes and instructions of their president.
Cut it.
And having that belief.
So we made this comparison last week, reminding you about John Hinckley Jr. John Hinckley Jr. tried to kill Ronald Reagan, believing that it would make Jodie Foster, the actress, happy. That doesn't mean that Jodie Foster had anything to do with it. It doesn't mean that she ordered it. It doesn't mean that because she was so beautiful, she compelled him to try and kill a president. No one in their right mind would look at John Hinckley Jr. and say that Jodie Foster has anything to do with that madness. The same can be said about January 6th. Donald Trump stood on a podium, and yeah, he laid out evidence of election fraud. He also told them, go to the Capitol, protest peacefully and patriotically, and give Republicans the courage to do the right thing, which is to challenge the results. People didn't listen to him. I mean, this is the madness of all of this. The Democrats presented a case saying that when Donald Trump speaks, the people listen. When Donald Trump says jump, all of his supporters say how high. Right? It reminds me of A Few Good Men, right? Well, if you ordered the code, if you told them not to touch the guy, then why did they disobey your order, right? You know, remember A Few Good Men? Same kind of logic here. If Donald Trump truly controls his supporters, why, when he told them to peacefully protest, did they go violently into the Capitol? Doesn't work like that. What Mitch McConnell is saying here is not a legal analysis. Like, that's not how First Amendment case law, that's not how incitement of riots works. unless someone directly incites imminent violence or incites violence that they know could be imminent, you can't charge them with that crime. Can't. And yes, the case law over the years has looked at neo-Nazis, has looked at Klansmen, has looked at socialists, violent leftists. And time again, Supreme Court has found that that speech is protected. It's protected. You can disagree with it. You can think it's shameful. It's still protected. But what Mitch McConnell is saying here is that he's legally culpable. As we talked about, there were Antifa people in there. There was at least one that we can name, John Sullivan. He stormed with a CNN photojournalist. And when they got through, they celebrated and said, we did it. Are we really led to believe that Donald Trump gave such a rousing speech that he compelled an Antifa, anti-Trump activist to storm the Capitol, or that he compelled a CNN photojournalist to do it as well? No. As long as you can show that there were ulterior motives, as long as you can show that these people pre-planned it before Donald Trump said a word, you cannot pin it on him. And as we talked about before on the show, the geography of the whole thing, the fact that this started before Donald Trump had even finished speaking, that the people at the Capitol, most of them were never even at Trump's speech and never even heard what he said. And that even if the minute Donald Trump said, we're going to fight like hell, they ran as fast as they could from the ellipse to the Capitol building, they still wouldn't have gotten there in time to join the first people who pushed through the police barricade. So no, the claim that Donald Trump incited anything, absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Well, Mitch McConnell kept talking, I believe, so let's go back to the video and play a little bit more.
Was a foreseeable consequence of the growing crescendo of false statements, conspiracy theories, and reckless hyperbole, which the defeated president kept shouting into the largest megaphone on planet Earth.
Cut it there again.
The issue is
he says crescendo. Anyone who doesn't know music, a crescendo is where you get very soft, and then you get louder until you're very loud. So a crescendo is an increase in volume. What he's claiming is that it wasn't Donald Trump necessarily what he said on the 6th, it is what he said over months that served as a crescendo. Sean on the YouTube comment section says, big word, Mitch. Yes, that is a big word, Mitch. They're claiming that Donald Trump said a bunch of things over months that should have been foreseeable. He should have known would lead someone like an Antifa extremist and a CNN photojournalist to storm the Capitol. Donald Trump should have known. Well, again, that's not how the case law works. That's not how Brandenburg v. Ohio works. That's not how the First Amendment works. Everything Donald Trump said over the course of those 2 months was constitutionally protected speech. If he doesn't believe that the election was fair, he has every right to say that. Right? There is no law, there is no constitutional provision that requires that the sitting president must accept election outcomes. He still has to leave office if he loses, but he doesn't have to accept it. He doesn't have to smile. He doesn't have to hand over the keys to the White House and pose for a photo. He doesn't have to do any of that. He has every right to say, I disagree. I think that there was funny business. I think we should look at X, Y, and Z. I think that these people should be investigated. I think that if you actually check the signatures right, different results would have happened. He has every right to say all of that. None of that is illegal speech. Just because someone interpreted constitutionally protected speech, radically misinterpreted it to mean a call to violence, does not mean that Donald Trump did that. And the fact that Mitch McConnell is pursuing that, very dangerous, because there are members of Congress who have said very inflammatory things. And the Trump lawyers presented a very long clip of Democrats using terms like, we're going to fight like hell. Right? The guy who shot at Steve Scalise shouted, this is for health care. He was a Bernie Sanders supporter, and he had consumed Bernie Sanders content saying that Republicans are trying to kill people through their health care policy. So Bernie Sanders says Republicans are going to kill people, convinces a supporter that, yes, they're going to kill you if you don't stop them. That reporter goes all the way to D.C. and takes a shot at, the number 2, number 3, number 4 most powerful Republican at the time in the House of Representatives, and at the same time screams, this is for health care. So yes, under this logic, Bernie Sanders should be behind bars. Now, criminally, doesn't work like that, right? Criminally, it doesn't work like that. If Bernie Sanders wants to lie to his supporters and say that Republicans are trying to kill you, he can do that. That is constitutionally protected speech. Should he? No. Not good. But if someone hears that speech and then goes and shoots a Republican, Bernie Sanders didn't tell them to shoot a Republican. He didn't. He might have had rhetoric that led the person to believe that that was the only way to achieve the political outcome they wanted, but he didn't actually order them to do anything like that. So the same reason that Bernie Sanders isn't in jail is also the reason that Donald Trump wasn't convicted, or that Donald Trump isn't in jail. It's the same legal premise. Just because someone said something that was misinterpreted doesn't mean that they deliberately ordered the consequence of that misinterpretation. I believe Mitch McConnell keeps going, so let's play a little bit more.
The president's intemperate language on January 6th. It is not just his endorsement of remarks in which an associate urged, quote, trial by combat. It was also the entire manufactured atmosphere of looming catastrophe, the increasingly wild myths about a reverse landslide election that was somehow being stolen, some secret coup by our now president. Now, I defended the president's right to bring any complaints to our legal system. The legal system spoke. The Electoral College spoke.
I hear him talk about this, and we're done playing Mitch McConnell, but I hear him talk about this, and he says the intemperate language. The intemperate language. Donald Trump had every right, but the judicial system spoke. Well, as a matter of fact, the judicial system actually never heard the merits of the case. They never allowed discovery. They never allowed depositions, right? They never really heard witness testimony. They had the affidavits, but they never had cross-examination of witnesses. They never got to that stage. So Donald Trump has every right to be aggravated over the fact that every time he brought a case, they threw it out before he could get to the part of the trial where he'd be able to prove it. He has every right to be angry about that. Again, there is no clause in the Constitution that requires the president to go quietly into the night if he feels he's being railroaded. It doesn't exist. And when I hear Mitch McConnell talk about the intemperate language and how it offends his delicate sensibilities, I'm reminded about the old way that the Senate used to operate. Mr. Producer, go ahead and put up my screen. This is a depiction of what is known as the caning of Charles Sumner. This happened in May 22nd, 1856, inside the United States Senate chamber, where Representative Preston Brooks, a pro-slavery Democrat from South Carolina, used his walking cane to savagely beat Senator Charles Sumner, who was an abolitionist Republican from Massachusetts. He almost killed him. The beating almost killed Sumner, and it helped to contribute to the polarization of the country's opinions over slavery. It galvanized the country, right? The issue of abolition versus pro-slavery kind of boiled over when a representative from the House of Representatives almost beat a senator to death. If you want to talk about inciting violence, this is what it looks like. Right? If you want to talk about a politician being responsible for violence, this is what it looks like. And it's in our history. Right? We're also reminded of Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton going on their rowboats from New York into New Jersey and dueling with pistols. Right? You can look into our history and you can find examples of politicians trying to murder other politicians. It happens. It has happened. Very bad. Don't do that. Interesting historical anecdotes. Kind of amusing when you look at history in its full context that they actually came to blows like this. And canings routinely happened. Like, this was not the only caning in the Senate. There were fisticuffs. I promise you, there were fisticuffs. But when you see, and I don't want to call it the wussification of the United States Senate. I don't want to call it that, but it kind of feels like it. When we're only a few generations removed from literal canings, now saying, oh, there's intemperate language, boiled over. Come on. Come on. This is so stupid. No, Donald Trump did not force anyone to do anything. He did not tell anyone to do anything. He did not compel anyone to do anything. He did not convince anyone to do anything. Anyone who stormed that Capitol with violent intent, and I'm not talking about the people who went along with the flow and acted more like tourists than insurrectionists, which was the vast majority. I'm talking about the people who said, we're going to get in there, we're going to break stuff. We're going to root through congressional offices. Things that are illegal, right? Very illegal. You can't do that. Donald Trump didn't order them to do anything. He didn't. So it's just so comical to hear Mitch talk about intemperate language when you don't have to go that far back to find examples of that very floor on the Senate where he was giving that speech. Senators and representatives coming to near fatal blows over differences in policy. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? You think that the Democrats would learn their lesson. Donald Trump is now twice acquitted. He is now the most acquitted president in American history. Where do we go from here? You'd think the Democrats would give up, but no, they have more plans. Put up my screen, Mr. Producer. Schumer leaves door open to 14th Amendment measure to bar Trump from office. Tim Kaine is at the forefront of that 14th Amendment push. So it's okay if you don't know off the top of your head, maybe you read it over the weekend, what they're talking about. They're talking about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is here on the screen. Let me make it a little bit bigger so it's easier for people to read. It reads as follows. No person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislatures or as an executive or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So it's interesting. The interpretation that they are using here is claiming that Donald Trump is an officer of the United States, which they might be correct. But this part of the 14th Amendment says a member of Congress, an officer, member of a state legislature, right? An executive or judicial officer of any state. It doesn't name the president. So it's interesting that you kind of have to interpret it, whereas in every other way, it's very clear of which kind of positions count. Basically, if you engage in insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or give aid and comfort to the people who do, you cannot hold office again. So, having failed at proving that Donald Trump incited an insurrection, the Democrats' new big plan is to prove that he engaged in insurrection. That's a pretty big leap. It's a pretty big leap. We've already talked about in a court of law, it never would have flown at all. It would have been thrown out the minute it got before a judge. But to claim that Donald Trump engaged in it, or that he gave aid and comfort, and the aid and comfort part, they argue, is when Donald Trump said, go home with love. I know that you're mad. I know you believe it was stolen from you. Go home. That's their interpretation of giving aid and comfort. Again, very, very loose. You look at historically how these kinds of provisions, especially the one related to treason, aid and comfort tends to have to be a little bit more than that, right? It's someone shoots the president and you agree with what they did, so you let them hide in your home, right? Or you give them money so they can flee the country. That's the kind of aid or comfort thing I'm talking about. So they want to use the 14th Amendment to bar Trump from ever holding office again. How would that work? Well, they argue that instead of needing a 67-vote threshold, to convict, they believe that they could just use a simple majority to bar Trump from ever holding office again. Now, that is very, very suspect. First of all, there is really no provision within this that says that the Congress may determine. It says if you engage in insurrection or rebellion or given aid and comfort to the enemies thereof, you cannot hold office again. The idea, though, that Congress can make that determination, not well-founded here, because those are criminal violations. There are parts of the U.S. Code that deal with insurrection, rebellion, right? Treason, things like that, giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Those are legal violations that under the Constitution have to be prosecuted by the executive branch. The idea that absent an impeachment conviction, absent a criminal prosecution, that the House can come in and say that the President of the United States is guilty of something and therefore he can never run for office again, and they can do it by just a simple majority. Very, very suspect. And I guarantee you we don't want that. Imagine the shoe's on the other foot. Imagine there is Republican control of the House and the Senate, and there is a Democrat who says something inflammatory. Let's look at Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris bailed out rioters who at least one of them, after he was bailed out, went and cracked someone else's skull the next time they went out and rioted and looted. So you could say Kamala Harris incited rebellion, incited a riot, helped bail out rioters. Are we really supposed to believe that Democrats would be okay with a slim Republican majority in each chamber voting that Kamala Harris cannot be vice president, even after she had already been named by the Democratic Convention? Of course they wouldn't be okay with that. Of course they wouldn't argue that. Right? They would never be okay with that. But they truly get away with this now because they hold the power. And they will for at least 2 more years. Again, barring any unfortunate or tragic deaths in the Democrat Party, they need 6 people to resign or pass away. Unless that happens, they control both branches for at least 2 years. But if the shoe was on the other foot, the Democrats would be crying. They'd be screaming. They'd never let it happen. But they want to do this. They want to punish Trump by blocking him from ever holding office again, by invoking the 14th Amendment to strip him of his right to seek re-election. Now, I don't know if Donald Trump should run again. Right? We have 4 years to decide that. He gets to decide whether he wants to run again. Primary voters in all the states will, realistically, not all the states, but many of the states will then get to decide. And then it'll be put to the actual representatives from the Republican convention who will decide. Right? There's lots of people who get to decide whether Donald Trump runs again. I don't know if he should. I don't know if it's a good idea, but we have time to figure that out. Democrats want to take that away. They want to be the one to decide. And the question that we will leave you with today is, why would Democrats be so adamant about barring Trump from running for office again after they claim they just demolished him in an election? We said this on the show. We would have loved nothing more than for Hillary Clinton to run against Trump again because she would be easily defeated. Why are Democrats so adamant about Trump never running again if they just defeated him with the most votes the presidential candidate has ever gotten? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Not gonna insinuate my reasoning for that. To borrow the Fox News slogan, we report, you decide. You decide why Democrats are so adamant about Trump never running again and why they would hold that position if they legitimately just defeated him so handedly. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. We don't want to run 2 hours because, A, it's very cold where I am, but we also are having rolling blackouts, and the fact that we lasted this long is a little bit spectacular. So that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. Mr. Producer, put up the gun giveaway. We are doing a gun giveaway again this month, running through March 19th. Enter to win an FMK Elite Pro Plus $650 value. Yes, that is a threaded barrel. Yes, that is a red dot sight. A great value. We will be giving it away to one lucky winner who we will draw on March 19th. So there's a link in the description on Facebook, a link in the description on YouTube, and on DLive, there is a panel. If you look right underneath the video, there is a panel. You can click that image and you can go and you can enter to win there. I know it's really hard for people to find handguns nowadays, so we want to make it a little easier for someone to defend themselves. Remember, you have to be legally allowed to own the gun, not only by age and not be a criminal, but you have to be legally allowed to own it in your state. You might be able to have it be altered with the threaded barrel. I don't know. Make sure you look at your own state laws. If you have a state that has an assault weapon ban, chances are this handgun as is would fall under that. So just be careful. And if you do want to win it still, make sure that you have lined up a way for it to be legally altered so that it can comply with your state's requirements. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. People wondering what's my background. Lots of people don't know this. I have a green screen. So usually we show an image of San Antonio that's all sunny. I wanted to show you what the Alamo looked like last night, which is very snowy. So that's what that is. People asking why am I out in front of the Alamo. That's why. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. If you like the podcast, make sure you sign up for the audio version of the podcast. Very, very important. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Podbean. We go live Monday through Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and DLive. So make sure you like and follow our Facebook page. Subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube, and give us a follow on DLive. Right now, we have 942 followers on DLive. I really want to make sure that we hit that 1,000 mark. I like big round numbers, so if you haven't already, head over there. I think what we're going to also start trying to do is replaying our show on DLive later in the day as well. It seems like a lot of conservatives go on to DLive and watch conservative content after work hours, which makes sense. So we'll try it a couple times, see how it works, replaying our show on DLive later in the evening. There's also a link for different ways you can support the Conservative Daily Podcast. Join our email newsletter, right? Our text system, we're getting it worked out. Hopefully the text went out today. Parler is up again today. So Parler's been a little hit or miss today. So if you're on Parler, you can follow us at Conservative Daily. We're going to start using that again. I tried to post today's show. It wouldn't let me. So they're still trying to work out the kinks. But Parler is back. If you have an iPhone, this is an excellent reason to switch to an Android because Androids will be able to keep upgrading and updating the app. Apple phones will not. So make sure you check us out on Podbean. We are on Gab. We are on Rumble. All links in that description. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the podcast. My name is Max McGuire. Remember, everyone, if you're in the deep white South, make sure you stay warm. And remember that the fight to take back our country isn't over yet. But the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together.